We continue with a look at session 3 of the game of Whimsical Ways, working through, my little helpful, helpful visuals, if at all possible. And for session 3, and I'm hoping that you will be buoyed on, the wave of presentation so far, so that I don't have to orient anybody at this moment. So we're jumping right in. Now, session 3 also presented the issue of whether we had a scene transition at the session transition. And in this case, we did. In fact, I feel now, run out of gas at the end of session 2, and some of my discussion or thoughts were scattered as we finished out. And so I looked back at the recording and I thought about, let's sort of reorient a little bit and, remember who's where and what's going on and, stuff like that. So the first thing that I recognized, again, remember, you're going to start a new scene. You got to look up its situation. And I thought about the situation, and the first thing I realized, and in fact, this is a game design thing too, because now this is well embedded in my thinking, and went back and messed with a couple of mechanics too, which is that it is deeply incumbent upon the game master to, in this game, bring the weirdness. Now, I talked about that, right, in the prep video, the first video I did in this series. Remember, I even drew a whole loop, a unique arrow about amplifying the weirdness into the situation. And this is what I'm talking about. This was the moment, thinking about the upcoming session of play, when I said, it's the one thing that in this game that the GM has to do. The game does not have a grand setting with earth-shaking cultural calamities and mythological, escapades and stuff like that going on. It's not a new age. No, nothing of the kind. It's, it's a landscape of rollicking this and that. And nor does it have anything but, personal soap opera per character, which is fine. But that's kind of all sort of in this situation already, and one can refer to the situation, but one doesn't do anything about it as a game master. You just play it. You don't have a special role toward it, except that you're playing lots of the characters. So there is, however, this thing. And I said, okay, is that all we're doing? We're just playing out what happens with this relationship. We're just playing out what happens with, sort of my vague-ish notions of these doubles running around. And, poor 13, is really a fish out of water at this time. And, what do I have another job at all in all of this? And yeah, it was the weirdness. And all those things I said earlier, this is when I figured that out. And so first things first, I said, what is going to happen with that relic? Well, it can do a few things, but the one that matters for purposes of the discussion is the she's gonna blow thing. In other words, mishandle, misuse, fail to deal with the relic in a particular way. Now that it's back at the temple, she's gonna blow. All right, let's go ahead and be spectacular, right? I said that's sort of the baseline. If this, if not that, if not that either, then, well, what's it going to do if nobody does anything with it? Well, all right, good enough. So I settled that, and I said, I've really got to take these non-player characters that we haven't seen, or rather that the players haven't seen, as in the sense of seen and known they've seen. I've got to take them seriously. All right, who are they? What are their names? Let's get some numbers down. So I actually, wrote out numbers for them. And then I realized that I had been, using the stat block I'd made up for Shkazak and for Ogox, but we hadn't really needed them or rolled for them particularly, just a little bit here and there. And so I said I should individualize them. So let's see, what kind of a creature is each of those in mechanics terms. So I had this solidified notion of all these characters, and I had to think as well about where that relic was. Remember, I know it's in the special temple, and I've know now, after thinking about it for the second session, that is inside the pyramid, not somewhere else. But remember, I told you I really wasn't feeling that for the temple map, the original one I found. Fine, I said, I need an inside pyramid map. And I had some ideas. I didn't really want like a dungeon map in there, and I didn't necessarily need it to be historical, because most of those, at least the ones in Egypt, have this kind of anti-tomb robber and tomb thing going on, and that wasn't quite what I needed for this. So off to the search engine, for things like pyramid dungeon map and stuff like that, knowing I'd get 500 of them, and a wide variety of designs. And sure enough, I found exactly what I wanted. And like all maps, it offered things of its own, in that we have conceivably 2 levels here. I mean, this is not a Shkaza structure. Aha! These are the rooms that Ogox uses. And look, all the ones underneath it, they come from this hole in the floor in this room. So everything under that, they don't even know is there. Bonus. Okay. So, that quickly, I'm like, okay, well, there's the temple where the sword is, and here's this. And so I quickly managed to use this in my mind. I'm loaded on this one. This is great. I have a really nice idea. I'm excited about the pyramid. So I basically made a better situation. I've filled in things about the situation that a decent person would have settled long ago. But this is playful play, and I'm prepping kind of what I need to get this roll done. And for all I knew, we were going to run smack into a this whole system fell apart situation. And let's call it for now. I got to go and reboot everything. Who knows? So in this case, that isn't happening, and our black arrows are really nicely turning into blue arrows to go to next scenes. And we've already punched the situation and changed it once, so that all the arrows coming down into into scenes from that point forward are very much the result of what we have played. So I'm liking this. So time to up do my job, and make sure that if there's going to be a temple where the relic is stuck, I'm going to know where it is and what it looks like, and be happy about it, not just use what I had happened upon before. All right, so I did all that. What else then? So I had those, and okay, and of course the sword was with it too. Whether the sword and the relic had been separated from one another quite, seemed like something that I wouldn't want to make it up in the sense of causing or solving a problem that I had posed to the characters, in the sense of what would be more fun. But I knew that I'm thinking that the relic and the sword are at least in the same spot. So there hasn't really been that much time. And as I said, Ogox has been busy. So what did we do then in terms of play? Because I also had taken stock of where our 2 principal non-player characters were at mentally. At least, the 2 Shkaza ones of note. And what it really came down to was that Ogox had been in the situation where she wanted to do the final defiance on 13. And as she had said to Theoxa in the second session, that she was willing to trade out 13 for Shkazak, if at all possible. And failing that, just have someone kill, Theoxa kill Shkazak. Well, this was, kind of before the further events have occurred, and also she's had a much better look at 13 than she had before. She actually was able to have a conversation with 13, and therefore, in using the very same logic that I used last time for Shkazak, has realized that 13 is, full of opportunity. So Ogox has come to a conclusion. After the night's sleep, she has come to the conclusion that before, sacrificing 13 was plan A. Sacrificing or murdering Shkazak was plan B. Now it's all changed. She's had a night to think about it. No, this is going to work much differently. She's going to approach 13 and basically say, bump off Shkazak. And as far as the final defiance is concerned, is willing to reward 13 by tacitly helping 13 escape, and therefore escape the final defiance, which kind of leaves Ogox sitting pretty, and also gets 13, as she's told 13, I want you out of my hair, I want my lover back, I want you gone. But don't forget plan B for Ogox as well, which is that if Theoxa is really just a lost cause at this time, she's the perfect scapegoat. She's the perfect, very few of the Shkaza really care for Theoxa very much, although it wasn't as bad as the player characters perceived, but still, not exactly the most reputable character. Perhaps in many cases, people disapprove of this romantic relationship as well, and it's not gone well. And Ogox is kind of at the point where plan B is that Theoxa might make a pretty good final defiance candidate herself. Interestingly enough, there is no further point where the player characters got to interact with Ogox particularly, at least not to ask about that or find out about it. So Theoxa in particular never learned that Ogox actually had a pretty solid, not first plan, not plan A, but plan B was basically to kill her. So I'm playing this and thinking about that. So Shkazak, of course, and I'm following up on what I realized in session 2, I probably wasn't as explicit enough. So playing Shkazak, I can say, hey, I wasn't explicit enough, says Shkazak to Shkazak. I need to go and talk to that robot and make sure there's no misunderstanding here, because I could really use an assassination right now. So just as Ogox offers to 13, you can escape here with your freedom and any, tacit help I can give you, like a guide and stuff. If you bump off Shkazak for me, Shkazak is telling the very same robot, please, pretty please, bump off that terrible priestess for me. And oh, by the way, if you do that, I'll give you this plant that makes humans docile, and you can go take it back. It'd be very useful for you. So those two conversations, I have these non-player characters who are very intent on making their positions and their offer to 13 in this regard quite clear. So that's where I'm at. And we do play in which this is occurring. All sorts of other interesting things, but particularly more failures of memory and intuition. Statistically, I didn't really have expectations about this, but it was well possible, and actually had been, but especially that by now, the possibility that one or another of our characters would have realized a thing or two about, they already knew about the robot double. This wasn't mysterious that such an entity existed. It's in the Lifeline. It's part of what the players knew about. So missing the activity of those two characters again and again is a feature. It's a feature of play as we go along. It's not blocking anything. It doesn't need to be corrected. It's just that the consequences, the Black Arrow's identity as they went along, what was actually in those within the scenes, and possibly the transitions in the scenes, would have been different. And that is okay. I mean, play goes the way it goes. All right, so what really matters more than anything, and probably is the biggest scene transition in the game, was that a really crap fate roll on Noah's part landed Thioxa basically in a situation where, she was going to be completely flattened by whatever it was. And it made the most sense, considering how late in the session this occurred and how much time that the doubles had to do their thing, that they were finishing their theft. Remember, they'd had all this time now to pull off their heist. And so she runs straight into the purview of the double Shkaza and the double robot, and they recognize that given the confusion, there's already been confusion. A couple of the non-player characters or incidental characters are a little confused about, wasn't the robot doing this or that? Because you see, they were seeing the other robot. So this led to the possibility, that given that failed fate roll, that Thioxa basically can get cold cocked. I mean, it's a takedown. It's a game master takedown. It's a bonk. And in this game, that's what the bad fate rolls can do for you. Which gives us a scene shift right to where I knew where it was, which was in the lower part of the pyramid. You see, I was playing these two characters as if there were somehow two other players somewhere, and the kind of characters they had were very rapscallious, very larcenous or opportunistic, player characters getting what they could out of situations. So that's kind of who I had in mind as running around, lifting, like the cover of the first advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook, right? There they are. They're taking the gem out of the eye of the statue. Why? Because there's a gem in there, and I want that. So this is kind of the sort of characters that I have in mind. So what they know, of course, is all this confusion. They've actually been sort of exploiting the confusion of, for example, people know 13 is here, so this robot can walk around and do things, and they think that's 13. Stuff like that. So getting the drop on Thioxa like this basically means they can frame her. So they're like, great, let's drag her down into that spot, and we can get, we can put all the suspicion on her. She won't have the relic, but the relic will be gone. The busted up case will be right there with her. There'll be all kinds of confusion. We've opened the trap door in there, and that is going to create all kinds of confusion too, sticking her down there. This is great. This is going to cause all sorts of trouble. And we can make our escape all the better. And I had already planned their escape. They wanted to get to the river, and they had a little boat. They'd already set up a little rope going down next to the falls that I'd talked about. And I was like, okay, they've kind of they've got another boat down there. They've got their getaway, all set. So that's what Thioxa wakes up into. She wakes up in a completely unknown place, the circumstances of, this weird shattered container of some kind. And so Noah plays Thioxa, baffled, wondering where to go and what to do. I've talked a little bit in the play post already about what it was like to be GMing the moments with Noah deciding what Thioxa did or not. Long story short, she ends up opening the trapdoor and sticking her head up, and surprising the crap out of the Shikaza up there, who had no idea there was a trapdoor right there. And, mayhem ensues. So that closes out the third session. But really what it is, we are in that scenes to Blue Arrow to new scenes, and in the scenes things really happen. And so we have enormous amount of momentum for whatever cut we need. Like, basically, Theoxa gets bonked, Theoxa wakes up. That's, a cut. She's in a different place. So it's not a profound thing, these scene transitions in terms of procedure. But what I'm talking about is the momentum of events that are occurring within them. And then in that particular case, just to let you know, I went and consulted Situation. What's the difference? The only difference is that I have to remember, what's the simultaneity here in terms of where the other characters are. And so different interactions with 13 and Ogox have been going on at the same time, and they have ended up in a particular place. 13 is actually supposed to meet a faithful associate of Ogox's, to basically get the assassination done. So this is all coming together in the sense that I know where everybody is and what that may or may not mean for context of what's going on inside the pyramid. So that's the only thing I did, was for the arrow, the A arrow coming down at the scene opening of Theoxa, waking up and going, ow, that I knew where everyone else was. A good thing to check in on at that point. But was their sort of head situation as a whole changed immensely? Not much. The two, rapscallious doubles are doing what they do, but it's not as though they're hideously changing the context of everything everyone else is happening. Although the fact that they have the relic does, does not bode well in a number of ways, but that is on the boil. So that's kind of where that one ended. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else more profound about it. Do keep it in mind when, in a bit later, when I present a video on other modes of interacting with the fiction, other modes of what scenes and situations even are. And I'm not talking about styles of play, I'm talking about kind of a mode of unplay. So this would be the video and the processes within it that basically honor what people say and honor the changing scene components, little situation, that we know as we continue along in it. And recognizing that there are things people will do that they call role-playing that actually don't do that. So we'll talk more about that when we get there. But this is the reference point for that. So formally stating it here. All right, session 3, pretty easy to talk about. I hope I clarified a couple of points of things that I did that were specific to this moment. And this particular game in design, and the things I had or had not done earlier. So, all right. Hoping for lots of questions and stuff on this one as we move into talking soon about session 4, the final one of this particular game experience.